Imagine a holiday so powerful it could unite a fractured nation, yet so humble it began as just a simple day of fasting and prayer. Picture a feast forgotten for centuries, a tradition revived by a woman whose pen was mightier than the sword, and a proclamation issued in the darkest days of civil war. This is the untold story of Thanksgiving, how it journeyed from the windswept shores of Plymouth to the heart of a divided America. Welcome back to Historical USA. I am your host, historian Lisa Weekland, and today we'll uncover the real roots of Thanksgiving, beyond just the turkey and the pumpkin pie. Are you ready to discover the hidden history behind Thanksgiving? Let's dig in. Now, I know we have covered the first Thanksgiving in the first two episodes of this series, and if you haven't checked those out, please go check them out. I will provide the links in the description boxes below, but it does bear repeating. Now, contrary to popular belief, that first Thanksgiving was not called Thanksgiving. Especially was not called Thanksgiving by the Pilgrims, nor did it set any sort of annual precedent. In fact, over 150 years, the 1621 feast was largely forgotten. Most of our founding fathers had never even heard of William Bradford, let alone the first Thanksgiving. No, that first Thanksgiving would be revived in the American imagination in the 19th century. In 1621, it was a gathering to celebrate the three-day harvest festival, and it was attended by 53 surviving pilgrims and about 90 Wampanoag warriors. Now, the menu was a far cry from today's Thanksgiving table. They had venison, and instead of turkey, they would have had duck, possibly goose, corn, shellfish, and squash. There was no mashed potatoes, there was no cranberry sauce, there was no pumpkin pie, sadly. Sugar and flour were scarce. What's especially fascinating is that the Pilgrims didn't see this as a religious day of Thanksgiving. For them, true Thanksgiving days were solemn, marked by prayer, fasting, not feasting. The 1621 event was a harvest celebration, more akin to English harvest home festivals than the later religious observances. But as the colonies grew, especially in New England, the tradition for declaring special days of Thanksgiving or humiliation, which was fasting, took root. These weren't annual holidays, but they were proclamations in response to specific acts of providence, such as a relief from drought, military victories, or the end of an epidemic. On the days of Thanksgiving, communities gathered for church services, sang psalms, and shared a meal, but the tone was more solemn than celebratory. Puritan theology shaped these observances. The Puritans believed that God's favor or displeasure was reflected in the fortunes of the community. Days of fasting and humiliation were called when disaster struck, while days of Thanksgiving followed blessings like a successful harvest. Attendance was mandatory, and the entire community was expected to participate. These practices would actually reinforce social cohesion and moral responsibility. And it's no surprise that these Thanksgiving observances were the strongest in New England, where the Calvinist tradition emphasized communal worship and gratitude. By the 1660s, annual days of Thanksgiving became common in Massachusetts and Connecticut, often held in late November to mark the end of the harvest. Over time, as New England migrated west, they carried these traditions with them, gradually spreading the custom across the young nation. But like I said, it is important to note, outside of New England, Thanksgiving was virtually unknown in the South. Christmas was the major winter holiday, and Thanksgiving was sometimes viewed with suspicion as a Yankee or even abolitionist observance well into the 19th century. Now fast forward to the American Revolution. As the colonies fought for independence, the Continental Congress declared several national days of public thanksgiving and prayer. These were not annual holidays, but responses to specific events, most notably military victories, such as the pivotal win at Saratoga in 1777. Samuel Adams even drafted the first national Thanksgiving Proclamation, calling on Americans to express gratitude for success in battle and to seek forgiveness for national sins. These proclamations were deeply religious, reflecting the language and values of the time. They emphasized humility, repentance, and gratitude to God for blessings received. Now, after the war, the new federal government faced the challenge of uniting a diverse and often factious nation. In 1789, at the urging of Congress, President George Washington issued the first presidential Thanksgiving proclamation. He designated Thursday, November 26th, as a day for Americans to give thanks for the successful conclusion of the Revolution and the adoption of the new Constitution. Washington's proclamation, though, was careful to avoid making Thanksgiving an annual or mandated observance. He recognized the delicate balance between federal authority and state sovereignty, as well as the importance of respecting religious diversity. His message focused on gratitude for civil and religious liberty, national unity, and the blessings of peace. Now, not all presidents embraced the idea of national religious observance. Thomas Jefferson was a staunch advocate for the separation of church and state, and he refused to issue Thanksgiving proclamations during his presidency, though he would issue them as governor of Virginia. He believed that such declarations blurred the line between government and religion, a principle that he famously articulated in his 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, saying, quote, "I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment or religion." Jefferson was wholly against establishing any sort of state church, like the English had done with the Church of England. Jefferson's stance, like the man himself, was controversial, especially in New England, where Thanksgiving was cherished. His silence on the holiday fueled rumors that he was anti-religious. But in reality, like I said, he saw Thanksgiving as a matter best left to the states and local communities. Now, Washington and John Adams, they both declared national days of Thanksgiving during their presidency. Jefferson disrupted that whole entire proceeding, and Thanksgiving really kind of receded from the federal stage. Presidents like James Madison would occasionally revive the tradition in response to war or crisis, but for most of the 19th century, Thanksgiving was a regional affair, celebrated primarily in New England and gradually in other northern states. And each state set its own date, sometimes in October, sometimes in December, and the holiday's character varied widely. Now, by the mid-1800s, Thanksgiving had become a cherished occasion for family reunions, church services, and communal feasting. The menu began to resemble kind of what we know today: roasted turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. But regional and class differences persisted. Wealthier families hosted these elaborate dinners with oysters, game, and fine wines, while working class households made do with more simple fare. And charity has always been an important part of the holiday. Many communities organized food drives and distributed meals to the poor, reinforcing Thanksgiving's role as a time for gratitude and generosity. Now enter Sarah Josepha Hale, a name every Thanksgiving table should remember. Born in New Hampshire in 1788, Hale was a pioneering editor, the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb, and the most influential advocate for making Thanksgiving a national holiday. Starting in 1827, she used her platform as editor of Godey's Lady's Book, the most widely read women's magazine of the era, to promote Thanksgiving as a unifying patriotic celebration. Every November, Hale published editorials, stories, and recipes extolling the virtues of Thanksgiving. She wrote hundreds of letters to governors, ministers, and presidents, urging them to declare a national day of thanks on the last Thursday of November. Her vision was inclusive. She imagined Thanksgiving as a festival for all Americans, regardless of region, religion, or background. Hale's fame as the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb helped her gain access to some pretty high-ranking political leaders. She believed that Thanksgiving, like her beloved nursery rhyme, would become a cherished part of American childhood and family life. It was Hale that was instrumental in reviving the story of the 1621 Plymouth Feast. In the 1840s, she read newly published accounts of the Pilgrims and connected their harvest celebration to contemporary Thanksgiving observances. Through her writings, she popularized the idea of this first Thanksgiving, blending historical fact with sentimental storytelling to create a powerful national myth. Her editorials depicted Thanksgiving as a time for family reunions, charitable acts, the gratitude for the blessing of liberty and abundance. She argued that the holiday could heal sectional divisions and strengthen bonds of national identity, an especially urgent message leading to the Civil War. In September of 1863, as the Civil War raged, Hale wrote a heartfelt letter to President Abraham Lincoln, urging him to issue a proclamation making Thanksgiving a national fixed Union festival. She enclosed examples of her previous appeals. She emphasized the growing public support for a unified holiday, and her timing was perfect. The nation was weary, and Lincoln was searching for ways to foster unity and hope. On October 3rd, 1863, President Lincoln responded to Hale's plea. He issued a proclamation drafted by Secretary of State William H. Seward, designating the last Thursday of November as a national day of Thanksgiving. The proclamation acknowledged the blessings of the year, bountiful harvests, growing population, and the preservation of the Union, even as the country endured the horrors of civil war. Lincoln's words were both solemn and hopeful. In the midst of a civil war of unequal magnitude and severity, peace has been preserved with all nations. Order has been maintained. The laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God. He called on Americans to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in heaven. Lincoln's proclamation was the first to establish Thanksgiving as an annual national holiday, a tradition that had continued ever since. Thanksgiving 1863 was celebrated in Union camps and homes across the North. Soldiers received special rations, sometimes turkey, more often hardtack and salt pork, and letters from home. Women's groups organized drives to send food and supplies to the front, reinforcing the holiday's theme of charity and national solidarity. Initially, no surprise, the Confederate States completely ignored Lincoln's proclamation, viewing Thanksgiving as a Union holiday. Only after the war, during Reconstruction, did Southern states begin to adopt the holiday, gradually embracing its rituals and menu, turkey, cranberry sauce, and all. So as you gather around your table this November, remember, Thanksgiving is so much more than a meal. It's a living tradition shaped by centuries of struggle, hope, and the relentless pursuit of integrity. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you can, please hype the video. That would help me so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.